a wild foal, digging frantically in the snow, its hooves moving with desperate purpose, creating a hole that grew deeper with every scrape. Forest Ranger Daniel Foster watched from a distance, confused by the strange behavior. Young horses don't dig in snow, they paw for grass beneath light powder, but this was different. This foal was excavating, tunneling downward with an urgency that seemed almost human. When Daniel finally approached and looked into the hole the foal had created, what he saw in the darkness below stopped his heart. This wasn't random behavior. This was a rescue mission, and what the foal was trying to save would challenge everything Daniel thought he knew about animal intelligence and family bonds. If you're fascinated by incredible stories of animal behavior that defy explanation, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications right now. What happens next will leave you absolutely stunned. Daniel Foster had been a forest ranger in Idaho's Sawtooth National Forest for 13 years. He'd learned to read animal behavior the way others read books, understanding the subtle languages of posture, movement, and sound that revealed what creatures were thinking, feeling, or planning. But on this particular March morning, as Daniel conducted his weekly patrol of the wilderness corridor near Banner Summit, he encountered behavior that made no sense whatsoever. It was 8:17 a.m. when he first spotted the foal. The young horse, probably around 7 or 8 months old, with a striking pinto coat of brown and white patches, was in a small clearing surrounded by lodgepole pines. But the foal wasn't grazing, wasn't playing, wasn't doing any of the typical things young horses do. It was digging. Frantically, desperately digging in the snow. Daniel stopped his snowmobile about 50 yards away and pulled out his binoculars. Through the lenses, he could see the foal more clearly. Its front hooves struck the snow again and again, throwing white powder backward between its legs like a dog digging for a bone. But this wasn't playful. The foal's entire body language screamed urgency, almost panic. "What are you doing, little one?" Daniel murmured, perplexed. The snowpack in this area was substantial, probably 5 to 6 feet of accumulated snow from the winter storms that had pounded the region. The foal was creating a genuine hole, a tunnel that was already more than 2 feet deep and growing deeper with every passing minute. Young horses sometimes pawed at snow to reach grass underneath, but that was gentle surface scraping, usually in areas where the snow was only a few inches deep. This foal was engaging in serious excavation, using its hooves like tools, its small body working with an intensity that seemed beyond its age and size. Daniel scanned the area for the foal's herd. Wild horses in this region typically traveled in small bands of 8 to 15 animals. A foal this young shouldn't be alone. But Daniel saw no other horses anywhere in the vicinity. Just this single youngster, isolated and digging with what looked like desperate purpose. Something was very wrong. Daniel dismounted from his snowmobile and began trudging through the deep snow toward the foal. He moved slowly, not wanting to startle the young animal. As he got closer, he could hear the sounds the foal was making, not the typical whinnies or snorts of a horse, but something different. Small, grunting sounds of effort, punctuated occasionally by a high-pitched, plaintive call that sounded almost like crying. The foal was so focused on its digging that it didn't notice Daniel's approach until he was within 20 feet. When it finally sensed his presence, the young horse's head whipped around, its dark eyes wild with a mixture of fear and something else, something that looked almost like hope. For a moment, foal and human stared at each other. Then the foal did something that sent chills down Daniel's spine. Instead of running away, instead of showing the natural flight response that wild horses typically displayed around humans, The foal turned back to its hole and resumed digging. But now it was also calling. A loud, insistent whinny directed at Daniel, then back to the hole, then to Daniel again. "You want me to see something," Daniel said aloud, his voice soft with wonder and growing concern. "You're trying to show me something." The foal whinnied again, louder this time, stamping its front hooves at the edge of the hole it had created. The message was unmistakable. "Look here. Help me. Come see." Daniel approached cautiously, his mind racing through possibilities. What could drive a young wild horse to dig like this? What could make it overcome its natural fear of humans to essentially ask for help? As Daniel reached the edge of the hole, the foal stepped back, still calling, its eyes fixed on Daniel with an intensity that was almost unbearable. The young horse was trembling. Whether from exhaustion, cold, or emotional distress, Daniel couldn't tell. Probably all three. Daniel knelt at the edge of the excavation and peered down into the hole the foal had created. It was deeper than he'd initially thought. At least 3 feet, possibly more. The foal had been at this for a while, probably hours. The walls of the hole were stained with blood from where the young horse's hooves had been torn and damaged by the repeated striking against the packed snow and whatever lay beneath. And then Daniel saw it. At the bottom of the hole, barely visible in the shadows, was something dark. Not snow, not rock. Something else. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. He pulled out his flashlight and aimed the beam into the hole. The light revealed brown fur, and beneath the fur, barely visible, the curve of a larger body. "Oh God," Daniel breathed. "There's something down there." Daniel's training kicked in immediately, overriding the shock. He grabbed his radio. "This is Foster. I have a potential wildlife emergency at Banner Summit. Coordinates to follow. Need excavation equipment and possibly large animal rescue. I've got a young foal that's been digging in deep snow, and there appears to be another animal buried beneath. Request immediate backup." The dispatcher's voice crackled back with questions, but Daniel was already moving. He dropped to his knees and began helping the foal dig, using his gloved hands to scoop away snow, working to widen and deepen the hole. The foal, seeing Daniel's efforts, seemed to understand they were now working together. It repositioned itself and continued digging from a different angle, its small hooves striking with renewed determination. Despite its obvious exhaustion and injured feet, the young horse didn't stop. As they excavated together, man and wild animal united in desperate purpose, Daniel's mind tried to piece together what was happening. The shape at the bottom of the hole was definitely another horse, an adult from the size, buried under at least 4 feet of snow. But how? And when? And most importantly, was it still alive? The mountain snowpack in this region was notorious for collapsing unexpectedly. Sometimes cornices, overhanging ledges of snow, would break away from ridgelines and create localized avalanches. Sometimes snow bridges over hidden creek beds would give way. Daniel had seen plenty of animals killed by sudden snow events, but he'd never seen one that was still being dug for by another horse days or even hours later. Unless. Daniel worked faster, his heart pounding. If this burial was recent, if it had happened this morning, or even last night, there might be a chance. Snow created insulation. Air pockets could form. In extremely rare cases, animals had been known to survive being buried in snow for hours, sometimes even days. But the odds were astronomical. And yet this foal was digging. This foal had been digging for who knows how long, with bloody hooves and exhausted muscles, refusing to give up. "Talk to me, baby," Daniel gasped as he dug. "How long has your friend been down here? Give me a sign. Anything." As if in response, Daniel's gloved hand broke through into a hollow space. An air pocket. His heart leaped with hope. Air pockets meant possible survival. He pulled away more snow, enlarging the opening, and suddenly he could see more clearly. It was definitely a horse, a mare from what he could tell. Her coat was a rich chestnut brown, now covered in frost and ice. She was lying on her side in what appeared to be a natural depression or possibly a collapsed creek bed that had been covered by snow. Daniel reached down, trying to get to the mare's muzzle or chest, anywhere he might be able to check for signs of life. His fingers touched cold fur, but then, was that movement? Was that breath? "She's alive," Daniel shouted, not caring who heard him. "She's still alive." The foal whinnied loudly, almost triumphantly, and redoubled its digging efforts. Daniel pulled out his phone and took photos, documenting everything even as he worked. He'd need this evidence later to understand exactly what had happened. The position of the mare, the depth of the snow, the location, all of it was important. But as he photographed the scene, something else caught his eye. The mare's body was positioned strangely, curled in on itself in a way that seemed deliberately protective. And beneath her, in the small space created by her curved body, Daniel saw movement. Something else was down there. "No way," Daniel breathed, his hands shaking as he cleared away more snow. "Please tell me." His flashlight beam penetrated deeper into the hollow space beneath the mare, and suddenly the full picture became horrifyingly and beautifully clear. There was a second foal, smaller than the one digging above. Much smaller. A newborn, probably only days old, nestled in the space created by its mother's body, protected from the crushing weight of the snow by the mare's sacrifice. The mare hadn't just been buried by accident. She had sheltered her newborn baby in a depression, possibly sensing an incoming avalanche or snowslide, and had curled her body around it to create a protective cave. When the snow came, she'd been buried, but she'd succeeded in creating a safe space for her infant. And her older offspring, the foal that had been frantically digging, had been trying to reach both of them, to save both mother and sibling from their frozen tomb. Daniel's hands trembled as the magnitude of what he was witnessing crashed over him. This wasn't just survival instinct. This was family. This was love. This was an older sibling refusing to abandon its family, working against impossible odds to save them. "Help is coming," Daniel whispered, both to the trapped mare and to the exhausted foal beside him. "Help is coming, and we're going to get them out. I promise you, we're getting them out." The backup team arrived within 25 minutes, record time for the remote location. 4 rangers, including the park's large animal rescue specialist, Jake Morrison, along with portable heating equipment, excavation tools, and a veterinarian from the Idaho Department of Fish and Game, Dr. Patricia Collins. Jake assessed the situation quickly, his experienced eyes taking in the depth of the hole, the position of the buried horses, and the exhausted foal that refused to leave the excavation site. "Daniel, this is incredible," Jake said, his voice tight with emotion and urgency. "How long do you think they've been buried?" "Based on the snow accumulation and the foal's condition, I'm guessing 12 to 18 hours, Daniel replied. "There was a minor snowslide in this area yesterday evening. We got a report of it but didn't investigate because it seemed small, and we had no reason to think anyone was in the path." 12 to 18 hours buried in snow, Dr. Collins repeated, already pulling out her emergency veterinary kit. That mare should be dead. The newborn definitely should be dead. Core body temperature would have dropped to fatal levels hours ago. And yet the older foal kept digging, Daniel said. It knew they were down there, and it didn't stop. The team worked with coordinated efficiency. 2 rangers used specialized snow shovels to carefully excavate around the mare without risking collapse of the remaining snow. Jake set up a portable heater, positioning it to begin gradually warming the area, without causing the dangerous, rapid temperature change that could trigger cardiac arrest in severely hypothermic victims. Daniel stayed with the exhausted foal, which had finally stopped digging and stood trembling at the edge of the hole, watching every movement the humans made. The young horse's hooves were torn and bloody, its muscles visibly quivering from exhaustion, but its eyes remained fixed on the excavation, unwavering in their vigilance. "You did good," Daniel murmured to the foal, gently touching its shoulder. The young horse didn't pull away, too exhausted, too emotionally spent, or perhaps understanding that these humans were here to help. "You saved them. Whatever happens now, you saved them." Within 40 minutes, the team had created a large enough opening to access the mare. Dr. Collins descended into the excavated space, her movements careful and practiced. "I've got a pulse," she called up, her voice carrying a note of disbelief. "Faint, but present. Core temp is..." She checked her thermometer. 84 degrees. She's in severe hypothermic state but alive. This is medically improbable. "What about the newborn?" Daniel asked, hardly daring to breathe. Dr. Collins carefully moved her examination to the small space beneath the mare. Long seconds passed. Daniel watched the older foal, saw its ears pricked forward in desperate attention, saw its entire body tense with hope and fear. "The newborn is alive," Dr. Collins finally announced, her voice thick with emotion. "Core temp around 86 degrees. It's warmer than the mother because her body created a microclimate, used her own heat to keep the baby warm even as she was dying from hypothermia herself." The team fell silent for a moment, the magnitude of the mare's sacrifice settling over them. "All right, let's move," Jake commanded, breaking the spell. "We need to extract them both, get them warming gradually, and transport to the rehabilitation center. Patricia, what's your protocol?" "Slow rewarming, IV fluids, careful monitoring," Dr. Collins replied, already working. "But Jake, moving them is going to be tricky. The mare is going to be extremely weak, possibly unable to stand. And the newborn has never stood on snow, probably can't walk." "We've got the sling system for the mare," Jake said, "and the newborn we can carry. But we need to do this fast. Every minute counts." Daniel looked at the older foal, still standing vigil. "What about this one? It's injured and exhausted too." "We'll need to assess its condition once we get the others stabilized," Dr. Collins said. "But from what I can see, it's mobile and alert. It can probably travel with us." The extraction was delicate and agonizing. The team used a specialized veterinary sling system to carefully lift the mare from her snow prison, supporting her weight as her legs, stiff and nearly frozen, couldn't hold her. She made soft sounds of distress, but didn't struggle, perhaps too weak, or perhaps somehow understanding that she was being rescued. The newborn, when finally freed from its mother's protective embrace, was impossibly tiny and fragile. Daniel cradled it in his arms, wrapping it in emergency thermal blankets. The little foal, a filly he now saw, was barely conscious, her eyes half closed, her breathing shallow. But she was breathing. Against all odds, all medical probability, all logic, she was alive. As the team loaded the mare into the specialized large animal transport, something remarkable happened. The older foal, which had watched everything with tense attention, walked directly to where Daniel held the newborn. The exhausted youngster lowered its head and gently touched its muzzle to the tiny filly, making soft sounds, sounds of reassurance, of relief, of love. "They're siblings," Daniel said softly, understanding flooding through him. "The older one is maybe 6 or 7 months old. This is from a second pregnancy. The mare had this baby recently, and the older foal has been trying to protect its new baby sister." Jake looked at the trio, mare, newborn, and the heroic older foal, with visible emotion. That foal dug for hours, maybe all night, to reach them, injured itself trying to save its family. That's not just instinct. That's something more. "That's love," Daniel said simply. The Almo, Idaho Wild Horse Rehabilitation Center had seen plenty of emergency cases over its 20-year history, but nothing quite prepared the staff for the sight of 3 horses arriving in critical condition, each with a story that seemed impossible. The mare, officially named Courage by the staff, was placed in the intensive care unit with heated blankets, IV lines delivering warmed fluids and glucose, and continuous monitoring of her vital signs. Her core temperature was being raised slowly, carefully, at a rate of 1 degree per hour to avoid the cardiac complications that rapid rewarming could trigger. The newborn filly, named Miracle, required even more specialized care. At probably only 3 or 4 days old, she had survived being buried in snow during the most vulnerable period of her life. She was placed in a specially designed Foal incubator with controlled temperature and humidity, IV lines inserted into her tiny veins, and a veterinary team that took turns monitoring her throughout the night. And the older foal, the hero of the story, officially named Guardian, was treated for lacerations on its hooves, exhaustion, and minor hypothermia. Guardian refused to be separated from its mother and baby sister, becoming agitated whenever staff tried to move it to a different area. So the team made an unusual decision. They kept all 3 together in the same large recovery space, with Guardian able to see and smell its family, even as the humans worked. Daniel stayed at the facility through the first night, unable to leave, needing to see this through. He sat in the observation area, watching through the glass as the veterinary team worked their medical magic, watching Guardian stand vigilant despite its own exhaustion and injuries. Dr. Patricia Collins joined him around midnight, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Can't sleep either?" she asked, handing him a cup. "How can I?" Daniel replied. "I keep thinking about what would have happened if I hadn't been patrolling that area this morning. If Guardian had given up just an hour earlier, if the snow had been 6 inches deeper." "But none of those things happened," Patricia said gently. "You were there. Guardian didn't give up. And now all 3 of them have a fighting chance." "What are their actual odds?" Daniel asked, dreading the answer. Patricia was silent for a moment, considering. "Honestly? Based on pure medical science, they should all be dead. The mare should have died from hypothermia within 4 hours of burial. The newborn should have died within 2. Guardian should have frozen to death while digging or collapsed from exhaustion. But clearly there are factors we don't fully understand. The mare's body somehow maintained enough heat production to keep that microclimate viable. The air pocket that formed was just the right size and configuration. Guardian's desperate digging apparently created just enough ventilation to prevent CO2 buildup, and you arrived at exactly the right moment. 30 minutes later, and the outcome would almost certainly have been different. Daniel watched Guardian through the glass. The young foal had finally laid down, but its head remained up, ears still alert, still watching over its family. That foal dug for probably 12 hours straight, injured itself, exhausted itself. It didn't know I was coming. It didn't know help was possible. It just kept trying to save them. Animal behaviorists are going to want to study this, Patricia said. Foals at that age don't typically display that level of problem solving or that depth of family attachment. Guardian somehow understood that its mother and sister were buried, somehow knew that digging was the solution, and somehow maintained that effort through the night despite pain, exhaustion, and the instinct to flee or seek the safety of the herd. Is it possible Guardian watched the burial happen? Daniel wondered aloud. Maybe the mare sensed the avalanche or snowslide coming, got the newborn to safety in that depression, but Guardian was far enough away to avoid being buried. Then the older foal saw where they were and started trying to dig them out. That would explain the behavior, Patricia agreed. It witnessed the event and has been trying to fix it ever since. But Daniel, here's what amazes me most. Guardian didn't just dig blindly. That excavation was strategic. The foal dug at the exact right spot, at the exact right angle, to reach the air pocket where its family was trapped. That suggests spatial reasoning, memory, and planning that we typically don't attribute to horses, especially young ones. They sat in silence for a while, watching the 3 horses rest under the careful monitoring of the medical team. Then Patricia spoke again. You know, in all my years as a wildlife veterinarian, I've seen animals do incredible things to survive. I've seen mothers fight off predators twice their size to protect babies. I've seen animals travel impossible distances to return home. But I've never seen anything quite like this. A youngster working this hard, for this long, to save family members it had every evolutionary reason to abandon. What does it mean? Daniel asked. It means, Patricia said slowly, that maybe we've been underestimating them. All of them. Every wild creature out there is navigating a complex emotional and cognitive landscape that we're only beginning to understand. We see survival behaviors, and we call it instinct. But maybe sometimes, maybe a lot of times, it's more than that. Maybe it's love. Maybe it's family. Maybe it's all the things that we think make us uniquely human, but really just make us alive. 3 weeks passed. 3 weeks of intensive care, gradual recovery, and medical monitoring that rewrote several textbooks on equine hypothermia survival. Courage, the mare, had made what doctors called a miraculous recovery. Her core temperature had normalized. Her organ function had returned to normal, and the tissue damage from prolonged cold exposure had been minimal. She was standing, eating, and most importantly, nursing her newborn filly. Miracle, the tiny newborn, had thrived beyond all expectations. The first week had been touch and go, with concerns about developmental delays from her traumatic first days of life. But by week 2, she was standing steadily, nursing vigorously, and showing all the signs of a healthy foal. Her biggest personality trait, the staff noted with amusement, was that she refused to be more than a few feet from her mother or her older sibling. And Guardian, the hero whose desperate digging had saved them all, had recovered from exhaustion and hoof injuries and had transformed into something the staff had never quite seen before, a fiercely protective older sibling. Guardian positioned itself between its family and any perceived threat, human or otherwise. When veterinary staff needed to examine Miracle, they had to first reassure Guardian. When Courage was moved to different paddocks during recovery, Guardian refused to be left behind. Daniel visited them several times a week, always bringing apples and spending time just watching the small family unit. They'd been given a special recovery paddock with heated shelters, plenty of food, and space to move around safely as they regained their strength. On one visit in early April, as spring began pushing back winter's hold, Daniel found Dr. Collins sitting on the fence, also watching the horses. "They're doing remarkably well," she said, as Daniel joined her. "Ready for release soon." "Already?" Daniel felt a strange pang in his chest. He'd become attached to these three, particularly to Guardian, whose courage and determination had inspired him in ways he couldn't quite articulate. "Well, not immediately," Patricia clarified. "Miracle needs another few weeks to get stronger, but Courage is essentially fully recovered, and Guardian never needed much treatment beyond rest and wound healing. The question is, where do we release them?" "What do you mean?" "The herd they came from. We've been monitoring it. The band stallion is still in the area, but he's moved the herd to lower elevations for spring grazing. We could release these three near the herd's current location and hope they reintegrate. But there's a complication." "What complication?" Patricia gestured toward the paddock where Guardian was playing with Miracle. The two youngsters engaging in the kind of gentle roughhousing that young horses do. Guardian's bond with Miracle is unusually strong. Most older foals show some interest in new babies, but Guardian has basically taken on a co-parenting role. Guardian sleeps positioned between Miracle and any potential danger. Guardian shares food with Miracle even when there's plenty for both. When Miracle cries, Guardian responds faster than Courage does. "That's beautiful," Daniel said. "But why is it a complication?" "Because in wild horse bands, young males Guardian's age, and Guardian is male, by the way, are usually starting to be pushed to the periphery of the herd by the band stallion. They're too old to be babies, but not old enough to be challengers, so they occupy this awkward social position. But with Guardian's protective behavior toward Miracle, there might be conflict when they return to the herd. The stallion might see Guardian's protective instincts as a challenge to his authority." Daniel pondered this. "So what are the options?" "We could keep them in a sanctuary setting indefinitely, but that defeats the purpose of wildlife rehabilitation. These are wild horses. They belong in the wild. We could release them near the herd and hope for the best. Or," Patricia paused, "or we could wait until Guardian is old enough to form his own bachelor band and release all three together as an independent family unit. But that would mean months more in captivity." "What's best for them?" Daniel asked. Before Patricia could answer, something happened in the paddock that made the decision for everyone. A ranch dog that helped with property management had wandered near the fence. It was friendly, posed no threat, but Miracle, seeing a creature she didn't recognize, let out a frightened whinny. Guardian's response was instant. The young stallion positioned himself between his baby sister and the dog, lowered his head in a clear warning, and made sounds that were unmistakably protective. Courage joined him, and mother and older son stood together as a united front until the confused dog wandered away. "That answers that," Patricia said softly. "They're a family, a functional, bonded family unit. Splitting them up or putting them in a situation where Guardian might be rejected by the herd would be cruel. We wait. We give Guardian time to mature, and we release them together." 5 months later, on a golden September morning, Daniel once again found himself at Banner Summit, the place where this incredible story had begun. But this time, he wasn't alone, and he wasn't on patrol. A convoy of vehicles was parked in the meadow, the rehabilitation center's horse trailers, fish and game trucks, wildlife photography teams documenting the release, and a small crowd of rangers and veterinarians who had become invested in this story. And of course, 3 horses. Courage, now fully recovered and in magnificent health. Miracle, no longer a tiny newborn but a 5-month-old filly full of energy and curiosity. And Guardian, who had grown significantly in 5 months and was beginning to show the powerful build that would make him an impressive stallion someday. The plan was simple. Release them in an area with good grazing, fresh water, and proximity to other wild horse populations. Give them a choice. They could join an existing herd if accepted, or establish themselves as an independent family band. Either way, they would be monitored by wildlife cameras and periodic ranger patrols, but they would be free. Daniel was given the honor of opening the trailer door. "Seems appropriate," Patricia said with a smile. "You're the one who heard Guardian's call for help. You're the one who looked in that hole." Daniel approached the trailer and placed his hand on the latch. Inside, he could hear the horses moving, sensing the change, smelling the wild air. "Ready to go home?" he called softly. He opened the door wide and stepped back. For a moment, none of the horses moved. Then Courage stepped forward, testing the ground, smelling the air. She looked back at her babies, because that's what they both were to her, regardless of age, and nickered softly. A sound of permission, of freedom. Miracle bounded out of the trailer with all the energy of youth, immediately galloping in circles, bucking and kicking, celebrating the vast space and fresh air. Guardian followed more sedately, pausing at the trailer's edge to look directly at Daniel. For a long moment, horse and human locked eyes. And in that gaze, Daniel felt he saw recognition, gratitude, understanding. Maybe he was projecting. Maybe he was anthropomorphizing. But maybe, just maybe, Guardian remembered the human who had answered his desperate call, who had looked in the hole and understood what needed to be done. Then Guardian turned and trotted after his mother and sister, positioning himself automatically at Miracle's flank, always protecting, always watching, always there. The small family moved into the meadow, Courage leading, Guardian protecting, Miracle exploring. They didn't run away immediately. They grazed, they investigated, they adjusted to their freedom gradually. And then, from the tree line, other horses appeared, a wild band that ranged in this territory, curious about the newcomers. The band's stallion approached cautiously, assessed the situation. A mare and 2 youngsters. And after some ritual posturing and a brief exchange that looked more like conversation than confrontation, he welcomed them. Courage and her babies were absorbed into the herd. Guardian took his place among the other young males, but always with one eye on his baby sister. "There they go," Patricia said, standing beside Daniel as they watched the now larger herd move up the valley. "Back where they belong." "Do you think Guardian will ever forget?" Daniel asked. "What he did? What happened?" "I don't know," Patricia admitted. "But I know this. That young stallion taught us something profound about animal cognition and emotion. He problem-solved. He persisted. He refused to abandon his family. And he somehow communicated his need to a human, bridging the species gap in a way that most scientists would say is impossible." Daniel smiled, watching until the herd disappeared over the ridge. Maybe impossible is just another word for things we haven't learned to believe in yet. Guardian, Courage, and Miracle continue to thrive in their wild herd in Idaho's Sawtooth National Forest. Wildlife cameras have documented Guardian's continued protective behavior toward his sister, and the family remains bonded. Daniel Foster received recognition from the Department of Fish and Game for his rescue efforts, and the story has been featured in several wildlife behavior journals, with scientists calling Guardian's behavior unprecedented in documented wild horse observations. If this incredible true story of family bonds that transcend species understanding moved you, please subscribe to our channel for more amazing animal rescue stories and wildlife mysteries. Hit that like button, share this video with anyone who needs to hear this inspiring tale, and tell us in the comments, what surprised you most about Guardian's behavior? Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the greatest heroes have 4 legs instead of 2, and sometimes the most profound acts of love happen in the wild places where we're privileged enough to witness them.